Hey, welcome back to Crime Time 911. Today we are getting into a cold case that hasn't gotten as much coverage as it should have. It's a case that has literally split a family in two. One where a member of the victim's own family very well could have been the person who took her life and left her only child motherless. This case hit differently for me. I don't know the victim. I hadn't even heard of this case until it was recently brought to my attention. But the reason it hits differently is because this case involves the grandmother of a good friend of mine. Shanna shared her story with me after I publicly announced my podcast on Facebook with all my family and friends. So, of course, I had to ask if it would be okay for me to do an episode on her grandmother's case and help bring some attention back to it. Thank you, Shanna, for allowing me to share your story. I hope we can get some more light on this case and eventually bring closure to you and your family. Vicky Ciccarella was born in Nova Scotia and was the second youngest in a family of 4 children. Her family had moved from Nova Scotia to Hamilton when she was just a young girl. Like a lot of teens, Vicky didn't have a great relationship with her parents and ended up living in a group home. Eventually, she would meet Sam, who was 24 years her senior and had already been married twice and had adult children. Vicky and Sam would eventually marry and have their first child together in 1984. Brad was Vicky's only child and was born with a genetic disorder called Prader-Willi syndrome. So I am familiar with Prader-Willi syndrome. I used to babysit a little girl who had this genetic disorder for a few years. She was definitely the sweetest little girl I have ever met. And those who have Prader-Willi may have distinct facial features such as almond-shaped eyes, a turned-down mouth, and thin upper lip. Other than having delayed motor skills, having a hard time thinking, learning, and problem-solving, one of the biggest traits that I remember about Prader-Willi was that people with the syndrome want to eat all the time, which leads to obesity. I remember the mother of the child I babysat had to put an alarm on the fridge because the little girl would get up in the middle of the night to sneak food. When Brad was only 4, Sam and Vicky would separate, and she would move into a townhouse with her son. Vicky was a devoted mother. It's not easy raising any child, but I'm sure raising a child with special needs is even more difficult. Vicky was always positive and did everything she could to ensure that her son had the best care. She even took a course to learn more on how to care for her son. Not only was Vicky a great mom, she was also an amazing grandmother to the grandchildren she gained when she married Sam. Her granddaughter Shanna describes Vicky as being like a second mom to her, and they spent a lot of time together. Shanna stated in an article that, quote, "She was funny, sarcastic, and a stern woman. She had a heart of gold. Brad was the love of her life." Sometime in 1990, Vicky began having an affair with a married man. So at this point, I am not sharing some of the names of those involved in this case because there hasn't been anything confirmed. And even though it's a cold case, it's still technically an ongoing investigation. So from here and throughout, the man Vicky was having an affair with will be referred to as the guy. The guy continued to tell Vicky that he was going to leave his wife, but like most married men who have affairs, it appeared to be just a story to keep Vicky by providing false hope. She had confided in friends and family when it came to her affair. Hilda, who was friends with Vicky since they attended Briarwood Vocational School for Girls, had told Vicky that the guy was just using her and that he was no good. Vicky's stepdaughter, Kim, told her that she needed to end the affair because something was going to happen. So clearly people knew that obviously having an affair with a married man is not necessarily a good thing anyway. However, I guess these people, knowing who this person was, probably already had an inkling of how they were, and clearly they had a bad feeling at the very least that something bad was going to happen. Vicky told them that she had been trying to break up with the guy, but he refused to accept it. He appeared to be obsessed with Vicky, even going so far as to spy on her. Hilda had set Vicky up with a friend of hers, and after one of their dates, Vicky had kissed this man. Well, the guy, spying on her, saw the kiss, and he confronted her on it. So this, I don't understand on I don't understand how someone who is married and clearly has no intentions of leaving his wife thinks that he has the right to be jealous when his mistress decides to move on with someone else. It's so hypocritical. You have no right to be jealous when you are leading two women along. On December 2nd, 1991, Vicky had been out grocery shopping at a nearby store. After she was done, she walked to her townhouse to ensure that she was home before Brad came home from school. Brad's school had made accommodations to get him home by taxi due to his Prader-Willi syndrome. So when he got home, he was only 7 years old at the time, he was surprised to find that the front door was locked. The little boy was confused because his mom was almost always home when he got home from school. So Brad returned back to the taxi and was taken back to the school. The secretary at the school started to call all of the emergency contacts on Brad's file. When Hilda was contacted by the school, she immediately drove to Vicky's house. She also had a key to the front door. She arrived at the house around 4 p.m. When Hilda opened the door, she found the house in complete darkness. All the curtains were closed. Hilda turned on the light and saw Vicky's legs sticking out from behind a wall where the kitchen was located. When Hilda approached Vicky, lying on the floor, she saw that there had been a tea towel covering Vicky's face. When Hilda pulled back the towel, she saw that Vicky's face looked bruised. There was another towel on Vicky's chest. When Hilda removed this one, she discovered a sharp object sticking out of Vicky's body. I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like to find a friend's lifeless body. Finding out that a close friend or family member was murdered to begin with would have been traumatic enough, but being the one to actually find them, I can't even imagine. I can only hope that Hilda has been able to heal as much as possible from this, and it's not weighing too heavily on her. Brad had been taken to his maternal grandparents' home that night. He would later recall that something felt different. His grandparents were not the happy-go-lucky people they typically were. On this night, his grandparents were somber. The following day, Brad's dad arrived and held a family meeting after dinner. This is when he was told that his mother was gone. Being so young and having a disability, Brad didn't quite understand. He would ask when his mom would be back. He was then told that his mom had passed of an illness and that she was with the angels. This confused Brad because he didn't think that his mother looked sick. He believed what his father and his grandparents told him for years afterward. I think that it would have been really difficult to tell Brad what had actually happened to his mother. I believe that his grandparents and his dad were just trying to protect him, and with him having Prader-Willi, maybe he wouldn't have been able to understand or even process the truth at such a young age. It was suspected that Vicky had known her attacker because there didn't appear to be any forced entry and the door had been locked from the outside. Did this person know that Brad would be home soon and didn't want him to find his mother's lifeless body? To Vicky's friends, there was no doubt that the guy she was having an affair with did it. They told the police about the affair that Vicky had been having and that the guy refused to leave Vicky alone. It was also revealed to police that the guy she had been having an affair with was a member of Vicky's extended family. Police would say that they don't know many people who would commit such a horrific crime like this and then take the time to lock the door behind them. Another sign that a person who has committed this crime might have known Vicky is that they had covered her face and the sharp object with towels. A lot of times this is a sign of remorse or that they couldn't bear to see their victim's face after such a brutal attack. And most commonly, people who cover the face usually know the person personally. So that's kind of where the remorse and the fact that they might not be able to not want to see their victim's face comes in. The forensic team had noted that there was a mark on the wall from a coffee mug being thrown at it, perhaps during a fight or a struggle. The team was able to lift some fingerprints from inside the home. However, if the perpetrator was somebody close to Vicky and had frequented the home, it would make it more difficult to narrow it down to a specific suspect. In 1991, even though DNA evidence was being used in criminal cases, the technology was still very much in its infancy. So at that time, it wouldn't help gain leverage in Vicky's case. The National DNA Database for Criminal Offenders in Canada was not created until the year 2000. The investigators assigned to the case, Avers Jacobson and Jim Lawfer, had interviewed a potential suspect for hours. This person was able to provide an alibi during the time of Vicky's attack. However, police felt that this person was not being entirely truthful. The investigators presented their case to the Hamilton Crown Attorney, David Carr, hoping to be able to lay charges. However, David thought that the evidence was too circumstantial to take the case to trial. Jacobson would later state, quote, "There was no doubt in our minds it was him. We put a lot of work into it. The Crown decided not to proceed." The name of the suspect was never confirmed by police. It said that a detective had revealed to Hilda that it was the guy that Vicky had been having an affair with who did it. Apparently, the guy tried to turn things around and point his fingers at Hilda, telling the police, quote, "What makes you think she didn't do it? She was the last one to see her." Hilda was the last known person to see Vicky alive. She had dropped her off at the grocery store on what turned out to be the last day Vicky would be alive. So definitely seems like a typical guilty party, trying to deflect the suspicions away from himself and point it towards other people. An innocent person wouldn't just randomly point fingers at others unless they had a real and legit reason to believe who had committed the crime in question. So the fact that he just randomly pointed his fingers at Hilda just because she happened to drop Vicky off at the grocery store, like, without any other further proof, as far as he knows, there was, no hostility between Vicky and Hilda. They were really good friends. They had no issues. So what motive would Hilda have had in this situation? So clearly he's got a guilty conscience and he's trying to get the suspicion off of him. Police would interview more than 40 people in an attempt to clear suspects. On the day of Vicky's funeral, police would be outside of the funeral home. So also in a lot of cases, perpetrators will actually attend their victims' funerals or memorials as a way to revisit their crimes. They get some sort of sick satisfaction out of it. Or in this case, the suspect very well could have been a part of Vicky's family. So of course he would have to show up because if he didn't, then it would for sure raise some eyebrows. Vicky had an open casket, revealing her bruised neck and face for all her friends and family to see what this monster did to her. The guy had served as a pallbearer, which infuriated Vicky's granddaughter, who was 12 at the time of her unaliving. Hilda was also disgusted by the fact that the guy had been allowed to carry Vicky's casket. Everyone suspected he had done it, and they still allowed him to take part in one of the most important roles at anyone's funeral. At some point after Vicky's unaliving, Brad's dad would move into the townhouse to help keep everything as stable as possible for his son. Not long after that, Brad's sister, along with his nieces, one of which was Shanna, had also moved into the home with them. Over time, the relationship between Vicky's and Sam's family fell apart due to the theories of who had committed the crime against Vicky. Brad was the only one who has maintained a relationship with both sides of his family. When Brad was in the 8th grade, he would finally find out the truth of what happened to his mother. He had been the target of bullies at school over what had happened to his mother, and he couldn't understand why. This is when he confronted his dad about it. With no concrete evidence, the case would go cold. In 2007, Shanna had started to make multiple pleas, and the Homicide Unit Staff Sergeant Ian Matthews reopened her grandmother's case in early 2012. Later on in 2012, it would be announced by Matthews that they were looking at a suspect and that the case was solvable. However, a year later, on December 17, 2013, Matthews would unalive himself. This is when Shanna gave up any hope she had that her grandmother's case would ever be solved. I've heard a lot of cases where they reopen and use today's DNA technology to help solve cold cases. I don't know how much DNA they were able to get from the initial investigation in this case back in 1991, but if they still have something, I wonder why they didn't retest it. Not to mention all the information that the police had been given from Vicky's family and friends, you would think that they would at least continue to look at to look into the suspect they had in 2013. If you have any information on this case, no matter how small it may seem, please reach out to Staff Sergeant Dave Olniak of the Homicide Unit at 905-546-3829. Who do you think could have been involved in Vicky's unaliving? Was it the guy who refused to leave his wife but also refused to allow Vicky to live her life without him? Could the guy's wife have also been involved too? Let me know what you think below. Don't forget to follow, like, and share this episode. It helps more people discover these stories and keeps the conversation going. Thank you for listening to Crime Time 911. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember to always trust your gut.